when you say you're an AI first company, it means AI is technology. You don't chase technology and then try to retrofit it into a problem to solve. So I think that's fundamentally flawed of kind of doing it. And I think the AI first kind of mentality is, what problems can I solve that exist in my business that I could substitute artificial intelligence or automation into? Car would be equivalent to artificial intelligence. It's going to get you there to your end goal significantly faster. And it's basically a property that you own, and you can scale your business significantly faster with something like a car. You can basically opt into a delivery truck model. You can pay them a monthly fee for picking up your deliveries, but that's not kind of like you don't own that part of your business. Logistics is not part of your business, and that's not your competitive moat. And the fastest two to apply would be to think about AI, using AI in sales and then AI in marketing. Some of them they're seeing as far as like 80% decline in their kind of on-site visits because of these AI overviews. AI overviews give you the freaking answer. They're getting these like 0-click answers is what basic that's called. Problem number one to solve is like, how can you optimize your content or the content you're producing on all of your kind of platforms that can be optimized for these AI overviews? You don't respond within a certain period of time. They're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to browse this website for another couple of minutes, but I'm going to go and look at a competitor's site.
Welcome to another podcast episode with FlowMax AI. And today's episode is for the founder who tried of drowning in tools, chasing shiny tactics, and wondering why scaling still feels so chaotic. So if you've ever looked at how big companies are using AI and thought, yeah, but how do I apply this to my business? Because we have so many tools and we are going around and being distracted. So this episode is for you. So I have Svetlana Makarova, an enterprise AI strategist with real world experience deploying AI inside some of the most regulated industries. But today we're flipping that script because simplifying what's work at enterprise level, we're going to be bringing it for you here. So get ready. Svetlana, great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Great introduction and great pronunciation of my name that everyone gets it right from the first time. So applause. So that's awesome.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an honor. So Svetlana, let's go ahead directly to business. Like, can you share with us your journey? And we're going to start with probably how did you fall into the AI world?
Yeah, great question. So maybe a little bit of a kind of a high level as to what I do and kind of who I am. So I would say an AI strategist and builder currently. So I help strategize, but I also help build. And kind of resonating with the message that you initially said is like, it's not just about enterprises that adopt these AI solutions, which we hear a lot of use cases about. So my kind of mission is to democratize these strategies and help organizations of different sizes adopt AI solutions, because I don't believe that AI should be reserved for, the tech kind of native companies. So I would say my journey started in digital, just kind of technology product management, creating these solutions from concepts to launch. And it was just traditional software development. And until I would say 4 years ago, I started working in the highly regulated space, so healthcare, where I was gifted basically a project and the team, data scientists, AI ML engineers, and basically a goal to accomplish this project that was at a concept phase at that point. There hasn't been much built, and we needed to take it to market. So it was a highly visible project. So I was like, it can't fail. So I got to learn fast that I have this team that we have to take the project over the line. So long story short, we built the prototype within, I would say, 3 months. It was a proprietary machine learning system, again, in this highly regulated kind of environment. And then within a year, we deployed it across, the enterprise. And since then, it's kind of my interest grew in AI ML. So I wanted to share kind of my learnings and what I've been learning from taking on additional projects. And now I'm leading quite a few of them. and or guiding and advising companies in addition to on their strategies in all kinds of again organizational sizes. And I took it to kind of LinkedIn. And then I started a newsletter, and I was just like, things that I'm learning, kind of the journey that I'm on can be useful to others. And so from that grew kind of the demand to kind of be on podcasts. I've started kind of my own podcast with a co-host. And yeah, so I've been kind of on this sharing of journey, and then also working with companies, as I said, of different sizes. I've also advised startups out of universities or like these accelerators on whether or not or where they should be plugging AI, because right now, investors want that in kind of the company pitches to, if you're not doing AI, you shouldn't be, or you should go back to the drawing board to see how AI fits, which I think is a fundamentally wrong strategy. So I help advise kind of startups where AI can't have a role, because I would say sometimes if you're not experienced in AI, it's really easy to overbuild or over kind of commit yourself into artificial intelligence. You waste a bunch of budget, and then you're not even building kind of the competitive piece of your business. So this is where I come in. And, again, having experience doing it at an enterprise level, but then also helping companies against that kind of growth spectrum. And I would say value has really given me, I would say, the platform to kind of talk about and really kind of customize my kind of thinking to different companies of different sizes. So, yeah.
Yeah, great journey and great story. And I know that every entrepreneur, especially our audiences, we are enthusiastic in building something. And we could probably start with MVP, we could go to the market, but sometimes there will be overwhelming, there will be overbuilding, there will be burning of time, money, and people and resources. That's good that you have this specialized clarity on what are the problem that you're solving. And I remember that we had this chat before our podcast episode, and there was something interesting that popped up. And I think you mentioned about AI first mentality for many companies. So what's your take on that concept of AI first mentality many companies are adopting right now, and how should probably startups, mid-market founders interpret this without getting overwhelmed or overbuilding?
Oh, yeah. And I think that's an awesome question. And maybe I'll kind of take it into maybe an unexpected realm for others, instead of kind of preaching and saying everyone should be AI first. I would say, it's a fundamentally flawed way of kind of thinking about artificial intelligence. And I'll tell you why. When you say you're an AI first company, it means AI is technology. And so one of the things that we know in business is that you don't chase technology and then try to retrofit it into a problem to solve. So by calling your company AI first, kind of translates into you are a technology company that is in search of problems to solve. So I think that's fundamentally flawed way of kind of doing it. And I think there's been, or kind of thinking about it. So I think the AI first kind of mentality is, what problems can I solve that exist in my business that I could substitute artificial intelligence or automation into? So again, shouldn't be establishing your business as an AI first if you don't have a protective moat or intellectual property already developed. So maybe about 2 months ago, I don't know if you kind of heard about the Duolingo email that was sent, that the corporate sent out to all of their employees. And they're saying, basically the gist of the email was, you know, we're now AI first. Everything, that contractors you used to do that AI can replace, we're getting rid of contractors. For content to scale for Duolingo, we're now kind of leaning into LLMs and all kinds of, other ways that they've basically suggested they can become an AI first company. Now, that's the difference between, starting with AI first mentality and establishing your business around being AI first, and having a company who started with traditional software. It's actually was a mobile application, and then there's a whole history for them to be kind of out of the box thinkers, even with going mobile first instead of web first. but they had built a competitive moat that was not artificial intelligence. It was manually created content. They've established kind of like the principles of how they deliver content. And now their core business principles or core business assets that they're now scaling with AI. Now, if you don't have any of that, and then you're saying like, oh, we're going to start our business and we're going to be AI first, everything we do will be automated with agents, and then there's going to be agents kind of floating around my business. And I think this is kind of very popular opinion at this point. I come across these YouTube videos or kind of, advertisements that pop up into my videos like, I run a 5-person business, except those 5 people are not human beings, they're AI, you know, things. So I question again the value of what that means when you're saying, you're an AI first company. So you kind of have to kind of build out your IP first. And sometimes, it comes in the way of delivering business. Maybe it's, again, with Duolingo, it's their kind of whole business and the learning journey that they guide their users on. And then in order to support that journey, in order to scale to different personas, maybe to different businesses, different business models, they need more content. So how do you typically in traditional setting kind of scale content? You hire more authors. You hire more people who will curate or basically author that content. Now LLMs can do that. So again, I would say, what is your competitive moat and where can you provide these additional efficiencies within your business to scale these, additional to get additional value from artificial intelligence? But yeah, I'm not a big fan of calling it AI first or being an AI first company because, again, it's a flawed way of thinking, of messaging that, hey, I'm an AI company in search of problems to solve. I don't even know what problems I'm solving. Yeah, that's hopefully it makes sense for others. But one of the things that I would say is like, how do you go around that? So there's basically a framework to think about it. Maybe it's like a 3-step plan. You identify what core business, what your core value your company provides. So again, I would suggest that you build out your IP in a non-AI way because AI is quite expensive to start with. If you're building your especially intellectual property around it, see what tasks or what critical decision points you have that are just, you have a lot of these decision points that are hard to scale with traditional software development, and then decide whether it's feasible for you to replace that step with artificial intelligence. But it's not going to help solve your business problem for you. So if you don't have a competitive or maybe a differentiated business strategy, it's not AI is not the right time to like plug it in. Like I would establish the your core business model and how you're delivering that value to your customers before you can actually introduce AI to help scale your business.
So the non-negotiable here is your moat, and also what is the efficiency that you are just improving, productivity, and also the value of your clients, right? And that's pretty valuable because like a lot of entrepreneurs, as I said earlier, like too enthusiastic and sometimes we have so many blind spots when we're going through creating a product, MVP, a solution, or even a business itself, or even revamping the business just for AI. So that is also the something to keep in mind, especially if you want to shift, if you want to pivot, if you want to improve.
And maybe I'll add maybe one caveat because I think one objections to your audience might be like, well, we're not all about building. We don't actually want to build. We just want to leverage AI for efficiency. Like we just want AI to help us write emails faster or maybe create marketing copies, right? So I just want to emphasize that that's not the competitive moat. Like anyone can pick up the same model and do the same and reach the same audiences. And I think, I also teach at the next MBA program where we talk about AI and marketing and sales. Well, AI is also kind of how I would say it's like reimagining the whole world of marketing and what it means to be discoverable online. You have these AI overviews that are not now picking up all of the content from your website. So it's not about how quickly and how much volume you're putting out of the content. It's like, what's the competitive moat? And then what is the differentiation in your business? So again, you could use AI for efficiency gains, but it's only going to take your business as far because that's not a differentiator for your business. Anyone, you and I can get access to ChatGPT and we can try to outcompete each other to be like, hey, who can create the biggest, the best marketing copy to capture audience is better. But again, that doesn't pause someone else to pick up, ChatGPT and do the same. So again, you can use it for efficiency gains. And the way that I'm kind of thinking about it is like it's your rented strategy for efficiency gains. And if you're kind of thinking about the business model and how I've been kind of talking about, then the analogy here is, let's say, Zappos immediately comes to mind. Are you familiar with Zappos? It's like the company who was selling, shoes online, and how they started. Maybe I can provide a little bit of context, but Zappos, I don't remember, it was like maybe early 2000s when they started. And the founders of the business were like, well, we don't have much money to invest into this kind of online platform to actually deliver and like create this comprehensive backend infrastructure to deliver these shoes that people order online. So they've created this kind of like makeshift, like perceived way of delivering shoes and like purchasing. So they would wait for customers to arrive on their website. They would capture that order, and behind the scenes someone else would like go to another computer, basically order the shoes from a website or run to a store, go get those shoes, and then pass it on to someone else like behind the scenes. They would package it up and then they would ship it off. So it's a completely like manual process of actually delivering the service, but you figure out the demand, right? Like, is this a desirable service? Is there viability behind that business? So when you're kind of talking about business model delivery, we're delivering anything. So think about it like, how can I deliver it first? Well, I can walk to that person and kind of deliver them that package. I can get a bike. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's going to get me there faster. I can also buy a car. Wouldn't it be awesome? Because I can, get there in in a few minutes and pick up another order and then deliver it more. So you're scaling, but as you kind of go through these strategies, it becomes more and more expensive, right? So when you walk, it's the cheapest. You go and then on your own time, you go and deliver it. Car would be equivalent to artificial intelligence. It's going to get you there to your end goal significantly faster. And it's basically a property that you own, and you can scale your business significantly faster with something like a car. An alternative route, which is like you can also rent time and you can rent vehicles. So you can basically opt into a delivery truck model. You can pay them a monthly fee for picking up your deliveries, but that's not kind of like, you don't own that part of your business. Logistics is not part of your business. And that's not your competitive moat. That's someone else that you're paying and basically contributing to their business model by paying them the space. So when you're doing this kind of efficiency gains in your business and you're doing things faster, like creating content, that's rented business model. So that's equivalent to hiring a delivery truck to do the service deliveries for you, because you're contributing money each month to that company who's actually generated that AI model. It's not actually helping you build that intellectual property in-house. So hopefully those additional analogies kind of helped drive that message home, in case there are some objections to kind of how I was describing it.
Yeah, that's very practical analogy. Walking, having a bike, and a car. And it made me visualize like what's the difference between doing it manually, doing it outsourcing with a truck, and whether you have a moat or not. So those are very clear. And I hope our audience got the analogy. And I know that Zap was your example and that the probably one of the use case or scenarios that you have witnessed. If we were to talk about AI first isn't practical, for sure. What's the smartest mindset to adopt in your own recommendation?
So it really depends on it. As I kind of mentioned, the easiest way to think about artificial intelligence, I would say, is like, for any business, the way you drive value is by creating something in your business that you deliver in the way of products or services to a customer, right? So, and the core of it is a business model. So, how you're actually generating funds and revenue into your business and how you're creating value for, again, the end consumers. So that is your business model. The other side of it is, how do you actually deliver on those services? So this is where you kind of start hiring a team and you talk about operational efficiencies and things like that. So, and that is part of your operating model. So the whole goal of the business is to grow over time, right? So if your business is stagnating or declining, it's not a good thing. So you always want to be kind of trending up in kind of your growth. So the way you do that is if you have the business model, the idea is for you to generate more money, more revenue while keeping the costs down, right? So and that's ultimately how you kind of grow your business. So, and then there's a lot of talk, and it doesn't matter what size of a business you are, but ultimately it comes down to the owners of that business. Well, what is kind of your near term goal? So, are there things that you're struggling on revenue generating side? Is this where we should be kind of focusing in and then honing in on your business model, maybe accelerating how the value is delivered? So, think about Duolingo use case is that they wanted to generate more content to capture more markets, to capture additional students, and then to be able to supply content to them at scale, at a significant larger scale than maybe they were supporting. And so the whole idea and the whole objective is to generate more value for the company and then to generate more value for the end customers. There's also a lot of kind of talk about efficiency gains. It's like, oh, if you adopt ChatGPT and it writes, Copilot in your enterprise or whatever, if you look at Gemini across all of your Google suite of products, it's going to give you significant efficiency gains. It can analyze things. It can do like X, Y, and Z. It's basically helping you improve that operational model and hopefully driving some of those costs down. And so what is kind of your initial goal? Is the biggest problem in your business on the operations? Because again, it's a net game. You want to generate more minus the business revenue minus the operational cost equals to hopefully positive growth. So if you need to like cut down on your operating costs and that's a way for you to kind of maintain your market position, then focus on what efficiencies you could be introducing and into what part of your business. So there's some tactics in again both. One of the other things that maybe I can talk about that is very practical right now in the age of AI overviews is that the easiest two places to introduce AI, if you are not mature, you don't have a data science team, you don't have like a robust AI practice, you're not AI first company yet, and you're still kind of trying to understand like, oh, where do I plug in? Like, what are some use cases that I can actually adopt into my organization? The fastest two to apply would be to think about AI sales, AI using AI in sales, and then AI in marketing. So looking at ways that you can improve basically your copy. How can you distribute that content to wider audiences? How do you capture, or how do you appear on more platforms to basically distribute your message and then to gain more traction? Again, AI overviews are driving or slowing some companies kind of impression counts. Some of them are seeing as far as like 80% decline in their kind of on-site visits because of these AI overviews. And kind of like the cause behind that is, when people are typing in a question or maybe a prompt into even like Google, which is like a standard way of people searching, AI overviews give you the freaking answer, and which is like, if I was a user, I'm like, okay, well, I got my answer. There's no need for me to go down to these website options for me to go and explore more. So sometimes they're getting these like zero click answers is what basically that's called. And so problem number one to solve is like, how can you optimize your content or the content you're producing on all of your kind of platforms that can be optimized for these, AI overviews so that your answer and then the link to your content or your website shows up in one of those overviews? How do you start to basically optimize your content, not for SEO, which is search engine optimization, but for these AI overviews, or I think it's called like generative AI overview content strategy or something like that. And then the other thing is sales. And so I think a good use case or maybe an example to provide that is commonly talked about is real estate. So when someone's looking for a house, they show up to a website and they're like, well, I need to contact someone and I have this question, and the interesting thing about, real estate, and I have, a family member that works in real estate, is that you have to be like very quick in capturing that interest because what people are doing in that moment is that they're shopping around, right? So like if you don't respond within a certain period of time, they're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to browse this website for another couple of minutes, but I'm going to go and look at a competitor's site. Well, these real estate companies don't want you to do that. So they want to maintain your interest and they want to have a longer conversation with that so that there's a reason behind, when from the time that someone capture the customer's interest on their website to the time you actually call them, there's like even like some SLAs, like standard level agreement, kind of like, I would say not standard level agreement, but there's some expectations to return a call within like a minute 30 or 2 minutes. So there's literally like a notification going off on some person's phone, like someone could, at 2 o'clock in the morning, someone completed an interest form, please call this person. So they have to like, wake up, brush up, and then get on the phone with that person. So AI can do that now, right? So being, with these agentic AI and AI just solutions that you can respond to, a client's interest within 30 seconds. You want it to be within 5, fine, you can do that. So from the time that people submit that form, so you can start closing the loop. So things that are harder to scale with humans, especially in these off times, or off hours, you can now start to close in those gaps in with agents to be able to respond, to be able to answer quick questions. Maybe there's an LLM based chatbot on the website. So as soon as you kind of submit a form with a question, maybe it suggests an answer right then and there to kind of continue the conversation, which prevents you from leaving their website in the first place. So there are different tactics to focus on how do you capture sales and then what do you do with marketing. But those are the easiest places to start, especially if you're not a tech or IT company. If you do have tech, I mean, one other use case maybe to add to that as like a bonus is like, using co-pilots for coding. And that's a very popular use case with that. But, and lots of considerations for what AI copilots should be and should not be used for and for what types of roles I can talk about. But those are kind of like the immediate things that I would say founders, mid-market companies can do is to identify opportunities on the business model from sales and marketing that can help them grab that attention and then basically maintain that attention on their websites and on their business in the very short term.
Wow, there's so much value right there. So many use cases that you have shared, and that could open the eyes of even myself, for the audience, that there are actually a lot of use cases for us to practically use AI in terms of specific areas into each businesses. And these are very, very practical. And I would probably say most of the businesses have these issues in terms of delivering, in terms of getting leads, in terms of fulfillment, and in all the closing the loop that you mentioned. So that was really valuable. And I'm also quite curious about every brand, every company's moat. Like, I know that you have been with a lot of enterprise clients, and I was wondering if you could share what's one great example of a moat of a company so that our audience will also have some sort of a clarity and some perspective from you.
Yeah. So moat. So what is basically the way to explain it is that what is your competitive differentiation from someone else who is basically in the same space or plays in the same market, right? So what makes me or as a business owner, or as a business company different from someone else? And that basically gives me a competitive moat that is not easily replicable. So it's my secret sauce. It's something that I do really well and no one else can basically touch. So, and the way to visualize this is that you have like, I don't know, in early, maybe, I don't know, 12th century, I have no idea, but you would have these like, castles being built, and around it you would have water, and then you would have kind of bridges that go and lead, you might have just like one entry point into that castle. So think of the castle as your competitive moat. If you take away the bridge, you have the water. So that's basically it's protecting you from any competitor to basically closing in on you and then taking your intellectual property. So there are different forms and kind of how that shapes. So one big, easiest one of all would probably be for larger enterprises is data. So they've been collecting data for as long as they probably existed. They just haven't maybe used it in the way of building additional tools on top of it. It's been historically used for analytics. So, how do I actually use this data to study past kind of sales and then to be able to help me project the sales or efficiencies or whatever in like the next year forward. So it's been mostly for analytical purposes to study the business and how the business have done in the past. Now the game is being changed with come in artificial intelligence, because then now the whole idea is like, hey, all of the things that we've been doing that are basically generating all of this data, we can actually automate now. So if you give us the data, we can train the model to actually mimic that kind of decision making or kind of that behavior, and to be able to do those tasks in the future for you. So, and this is why, there's a lot of talks about, replacing humans for some of those decisions, because historically all of those tasks have been filled by human decision makers. So you could use that data as a competitive moat, because no one else is collecting that data on your clients, on your products. And I think even in the space of kind of commercial technology, people buy data from each other. And again, historically, they've been using it to do segmentation analysis, to understand customers better, to be able to design products better for on their customers, or different segments that they want you to attract into their business. Now you're using that data that your own business generated that no one else has access to build your proprietary models. So could you automate certain parts of your business, maybe core values, to be able to deliver that service, faster, better, to a higher level of quality? So maybe one example, not a great one at this time, but I'll give you maybe something tangible, maybe relatable nonetheless. But think about, the big consulting agencies. So currently struggling a little bit with artificial intelligence, which maybe is a topic for different podcasts. But if you think about what the core of their business is analytics and doing market analysis and understanding kind of different business models, providing strategies for companies to scale or to do digital transformation and things like that. So they, as a result of every consulting engagement, they generate data, and all of that data sits in form of decks, in form of like surveys that they've conducted. So why not? Like, that is the core of their business. That is their competitive moat. So you collect all of this data and then you centralize all of the repository. So now new consultants who are coming in and maybe are newer to the practice can now basically use this knowledge repository, and in order to be able to consult another client. So what used to be a 6-month or a year engagement, now it's like, I'm just going to, put an agent on top of all of this knowledge base, and I can tap into those insights, and like, whatever I'm doing with this client has already been done 50 times before, with some of these other historical, consulting engagements. So I'm just going to pull those insights, and that's going to be reusable. So what used to take me again 6 months to a year, I can now deliver that same exact service in a month, maybe 2 months, right? I just need to put the contextual data into the system for it to know exactly what insights are going to be relevant to these companies. But that's one way of automating. It's like taking the data that is not accessible at that scale. Maybe individual companies will have access to that data, but collectively, no one has the data of, the McKinsey, EY, Accenture. But building that as a competitive moat and giving that access to basically accelerate the speed at which you can deliver value to more and more customers, like, that's game changing. You can also use AI in the way that I've kind of done it in the highly regulated spaces like healthcare, is how can you automate some of the things that providers, and I'm talking about healthcare providers, are doing, and they're doing repetitively, right? So like, from a documentation standpoint, are there things that we can help them with? And of course, they're always the kind of the end decision makers, or whether or not they want to go with that recommendations. But we've heard often, it's like, I do this thing day in and day out. For every appointment, I have this one task that I do. Why can't you freaking go and build something that can help me not do this one thing? I'm going to do it exactly the same way for every appointment. Why can't you like help me with documenting this thing? So again, and that's a way of, maybe it's not an efficiency, or I'm sorry, a competitive moat, but that's a way of automating or taking the data that only you as a company will have. And I'm pretty certain that no one will have that data because it's healthcare, and sharing that data is, you know, in that highly regulated space is not, but you can actually build, again, efficiencies. And as a way of kind of identifying value, like how can you quantify that value? It's giving your people more time to do other things. Maybe in their case, in the highly regulated healthcare industry space, maybe you can condense the documentation time, and maybe you can fit an additional appointment into a physician's day. So what used to take time for providers to dedicate themselves to documenting, if you can help automate all of that stuff, and could you fit another appointment in? So now you're starting to bundle, right? You're taking data that you use to build these efficiencies in the business. But now, as a result of that and the efficiency gains that you've built, now you've built capacity to actually capture more value in the way of generating more revenue. So there are different things that you can compound in over time, but you kind of have to be kind of strategic in how you roll it out. You can't just, go, oh, we're going to be AI first. We're going to get rid of humans, and then we're just going to like toss AI at everything. You have to be quite strategic in how you implement it. Otherwise, kind of falls on deaf ears, and then you're just being very wasteful in how you're actually implementing AI. But think about data, think about the IP of your business, and what makes you different from others. Is it the frameworks that you have in your business? Is there secret sauce in delivering your services that you only have access to? And is there data behind it? So as an example of Accenture and all of these big companies, is there data behind that secret sauce that you could help bring AI and help automate? So there's one common thread around artificial intelligence that will come up in any conversation, and this is a competitive moat type of question. It's always data. So are you collecting data, and then can you put that data to use by putting AI on top of it? So I would say that would be one thing to think about.
Yeah, perfectly said. I wouldn't agree more. I would say data has been overlooked with a lot of companies, but it's the most critical ingredient to use AI, right? To really maximize AI. So you have been with large scale AI initiatives, and I'm curious about if you were advising probably startup founders or maybe small, medium companies, and we're going to take maybe a one enterprise strategy that they could realistically simplify and apply today, what would it be?
So I would say it's a very important question. And I would say to differentiate between enterprises, because again, a lot of the companies that end up in the news that you hear about are talking about, implementing hundreds of these use cases of AI, and like everyone's using it, or at least that's the perception in the market. So how do I, as a small business owner or like a small tech company, know where the heck to plug it in? It's a very common question. So one thing is a huge difference between these enterprise companies and I would say smaller companies like maybe founders or you know again maybe even mid-market is enterprises are much more established, and I would say not more established, but in a way that they have more room or innovation budget typically to experiment. So they can do a whole survey across different business units, and everyone's kind of dabbling into these use cases, and then they're evaluating the usefulness of these kind of AI applications, and then they come back with like a very, nicely laid out kind of approach of where, AI could be implemented. And typically, again, a lot of these, especially in highly regulated spaces, you're just talking about bigger budgets. So when you're now, on the contrary, if you're a founder and you're a mid-market company, you're like, I don't have the budgets of the enterprises, and I don't have the time to go look at 20 different use cases for, I just need like one or two. Can you just like give me one or two? So I think that basically is the difference. And when you talk about strategy, it's like really hard to pinpoint and then try to give you an actionable strategy without knowing what your objective is. Is it to capture more attention? Is it to build better efficiency? So, but one thing to think about is identifying what is that objective? Like, what is the biggest constraint in your business right now? And like pinpoint that one thing in your business that you'd be like, if I could solve for this, maybe it's like supply chain management. Like the supply chain management is like taking forever. Maybe it's the delivery, maybe it's something else, maybe it's like the churn rate of our customers is just like through the roof. Everyone's leaving to a competitor. Like, I need to freaking solve this issue because if we continue at this rate, our business is not going to survive. So you're going to pinpoint basically, instead of trying to survey every possible use case and then coming to, gathering everyone around the table and selecting which one. I would say, as a business owner, is there one thing that you can pinpoint in your business that would be game changing if you could help, if AI could help solve it? So I would say or not even AI could solve it, but if it could be solved, right? So then the next thing is like, what is the information that you would need to actually solve for that one thing? Is there a data trail behind that to be able to automate? So one of the things, and I was reading a book, I think it's called like the AI business case or business case for AI or something like that. And the good example that they've provided is that, this author was hired to do a consulting project at a healthcare company, and they're like, we would love to solve this problem. There's this one specific problem that we want to help solve. And they did like a 3-month evaluation. Again, it's a highly regulated industry. Getting access to data and even evaluating takes forever. And so hopefully in these like smaller companies, this is not the case. So hopefully it'll move faster. But what they found is like, yes, AI is totally well suited for solving that problem. Problem is that they, for this longest time, I think the use case was around like billing claims, and every time that a claim came back from a payer, like a healthcare insurance company, there was a human worker that would respond to that claim, and they would like provide like a response, and then they would mail or email back that response to the healthcare payer. They're like, yeah, AI can automate that whole response gathering and like reference all of this data, but we need examples. Can you give us the examples to actually train our model to like know what the heck to give it samples of? And then they were like, yeah, we haven't been saving those responses. So it's just kind of been like a one-way street. They've just been sending these responses. As a result, it wasn't feasible for them to actually execute on that project. So I would say again, what is, going back to what I was talking about, the strategy is like, what is that critical pain point in your business right now? Is there data behind it? So if you were to provide outputs or examples, or is there a person that you could dedicate to provide guidance to this AI system or generate examples? We have also been part of projects where we've been creating some data, kind of whether it's synthetic or actual data, or like, de-identified or anonymized data sets. Like, we've done that as well. But is there resources to be able to basically tackle? Is there data behind that decision, that critical decision point? And then you choose an AI capability that helps solve for it. So you don't start with AI and then solve for like the problems. You start with the business objective, and like you pick one, and then you look at whether or not you have data behind it, and then you look at the capabilities. The other two that I would say, and this is would be more of a protective kind of moat, because you are utilizing your data in the way of kind of delivering services and like solving for a critical problem. But there are two other strategies that I've kind of shared earlier, is that what are the low-hanging fruit with artificial intelligence that you can take off the shelf tools to apply? Plenty of them for AI in sales and marketing. Like, huge, I would say it's widely adopted. There's a lot of use cases, lots of options to basically choose from. It really depends on the business and then what is suitable for you. But there are some like very easy, even out of the box kind of solutions that you can implement without significant investments.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, you mentioned about marketing and sales, and I know that you have given some examples earlier. If you still have the vault of your examples and practical use cases of marketing or sales, you can just have your pick. Which one is, maybe it could be a use case about most common problem of this size of businesses.
I would say marketing. And I think the biggest ROI, when we talk about return on investment, on where you should be investing time. So if you think about capturing attention, right? So like, one of the ways that businesses operate, or like in order for them to generate money, is that they need people to know that their business exists, right? So they need to, whether it's walking on the street and marketing, or putting, their business on kind of posters or whatever, like the billboards and things like that, maybe putting ads on TV is like, how do I get more eyeballs on my business? So, how do I do that? It's through marketing. Sales comes a little bit down the funnel. So, once I've captured their interest, they've come to my page and now I need to do a better job of converting those customers or basically closing in that loop. That comes second. So that's a one way to kind of think about, how do you capture attention? So maybe strategically speaking, also is like, again, AI overviews is what we kind of talked about is that AI overviews are rewriting kind of how business is done. So previously, and again, there's a lot of use cases and a lot of data around this, is that generative AI in general, and we're not just talking about Google, but ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, the more it gets wider adoption, people are going to the target sites of your business less and less because they're getting their answers via what they're calling zero click type of approaches. They're just getting the answer that lives on your blogs somewhere in that summary. And sometimes they don't even quote back or link back to your business website. So attention is becoming more and more of a scarce resource. So, how can you use artificial intelligence to scale more of that business? Again, one way of doing it is like being smarter about it rather than resistant. I'm just going to pump out more content. No, it's not about pumping up more content. Is it that content has to be relevant now for those AI overviews? So, work smarter, not harder, but how can you optimize the content that lives on your website for these generative AI overviews? And then there's like a wonderful paper. I think it's an archive website that posted different strategies you can actually implement. And it was like a research study that they've compared, implementing what content strategies in the content actually have a higher chance of showing up in AI overviews than not. I can't recall, but there was like 20 or so tactics that they offer for what you can actually do to show up better in those overviews. Of course, writing content. And then this is where AI is going to be really, really helpful is because instead of just focusing on organic reach, which, a lot of companies they're like, I'm just going to publish things on my website and and I might be on LinkedIn or I might be on Instagram to just like continue to advertise my services. Well, now it's becoming a platform with especially Generation Z and millennials. They're spending more and more time on social. So it's more crucial than ever to be on all of these social platforms. But how can you be on them all at the same time? And how can you pump out that much volume of content and be on TikTok and Instagram and X and LinkedIn and then keep up with your blog and then somehow even publish some like maybe videos on YouTube like advertisement. It's a very content heavy type of game, but guess who is also really good at content? Large language models. So I would say that that is another strategy of actually looking at again these tactics. How do you capture more of that interest, more of those eyeballs on these different platforms, and you customize and optimize your content for all of them? You can pre-schedule them in advance, you can create guides, you can create like opt-in pages for people to convert, and then as a result you're capturing kind of leads. So you're taking passive consumers into engaging customers, which have a higher chance of landing to your page, to booking a call, and so on and so forth. So I would say those are kind of the more immediate things that come to mind. And I would say the biggest probably return on investment if you were to spend time in kind of ideating use cases. And in fact, this is where companies are currently adopting, which again, totally makes sense because you want more eyeballs on your business. And generative AI specifically, is impacting or trying to like break that whole existing patterns of like this ADA model, the marketing funnel that we've called traditionally. So
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. And that's a great practical example. And especially that's most of the companies that would need that. It's the top of the funnel marketing, which it's still challenging with across all businesses as what I could observe. Not all are implementing all of it. And there's so much opportunities for them to use AI. And not only AI as what we mentioned, it's more about not AI first, but maybe solutions, problem, and then solutions first.
The opposite, right? So it's like AI, where can we plug in AI? And again, there's fundamental flaws in the way of kind of thinking about it. And you kind of see it in what I call, or actually it's commonly called the AI, I'm sorry, like the productivity paradox, right? So people are saying like, well, the sentiment right now is that, hey, we've been using AI in our business for a year, like 2 years, but we haven't seen significant gains from it. Like it's not, through the roof exciting that we can like actually let go of half of our workforce. It's actually not that significant. And some companies, again, there's reports on this, some are only seeing like 3% improvement, although the statistics show in their organization like that pretty much everyone has like a co-pilot license. So why is that the case? So all of these people have these co-pilot licenses, but you're only on paper are seeing 3% productivity gains. And so this is again a solutions first mindset, is like, let's give people the solutions and then they are going to figure it out. And again, then there's also like a big assumption is that you give them the tool and your people are going to train themselves how to do it, how to use them. So they're going to get proficient on their own. So without any training. And then two, and this is a pretty funny one, but it's like, as a result of giving them more time back for using these tools, they are going to all of a sudden just like pick up additional things to do because they're sitting around there like, I've gotten 30 minutes out of my time back. I am going to come up with a new thing to do in that time to give more value to the company. You know what they're actually doing? They're like, this is awesome. Not a big percentage, but there some folks are like, oh, I'm gonna go catch up with this friend of mine and then go grab lunch or coffee with them in this 30 minutes. Now that I'm like so efficient in delivering my existing work. So again, inherently without training, so for people who are getting these productivity gains, they are not kind of are using, or the organizations are not resetting the expectations with what they should be using that free time for. And so that's why they're not seeing those productivity gains. And I would say like the third reason is because productivity in the way of generative AI is not correctly measured. So, or it can't be appropriately measured as well. So again, the idea of let's give everyone a solution and let's figure it out without proper training is just so intuitive that people will use it is very flawed. There's training, there's like additional consideration, like rethinking or reimagining of the workflows to free up that time and reset expectations for what you are going to be doing with that time is when you can actually see and measure appropriately some of those gains. But I feel like, quick to think, it's like, oh, it's $20 a month. Oh, let's just give it to everyone. Everyone, it's like that famous moment. I forget, like, why is the name escaping me? But like the TV host, it's like, you get a car and you get a car and you get a car. And it's like, you get a co-pilot license and you get a ChatGPT license. Everyone gets a ChatGPT license. Oh, and we forgot the crucial things of training and resetting expectations. So it's a more so common in today's day to see that. I'm going to come up at some random point in this conversation. I'm going to remember who that host is, or if the audience remembers it, drop it in the comments. But yeah, that's the reality, I would say, in a lot of companies. Not everyone, of course, but there's a significant sample of companies who are approaching it that way.
Yeah, it's like the crowd is going there. It's, okay, I'll also get those tools, and we kind of forgot what was the priority. Yeah, that happens a lot. So if, let's say, I know that you just mentioned like AI ROI can be vague, and if we're gonna think about a healthy way to think about time to return of investment for AI systems, how would you approach it in your own way?
Great question. I'm a big fan of frameworks. So one of the things that I think, especially for companies who are newer to AI and maybe they don't have, again, an established data science practice or have a history of implementing AI projects. So, one of the faster ways to implement AI and the framework, kind of to think about it, is the McKinsey's Horizon, like Three Horizons framework. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but you're basically implementing initially what are kind of the opportunistic use cases that are very easy, the low hanging fruit that are not disruptive to the business. You're just kind of implementing them and you can roll it out relatively easily. There's maybe a shorter kind of duration of training that is required that's just so intuitive that is not disruptive. So those use cases tend to be around efficiency gains. And this is where, again, you hear a lot of people talk about like, oh, AI can be used for efficiencies. Again, that's the Horizon 1 framework and of this McKinsey Three Horizons framework. And the downside of it is that you're not going to get a competitive moat because everyone can use the same tools, out of the box tools, to build those efficiencies in their business. So those are going to be the shorter time that you can implement. You could basically get these subscriptions. There's not much build around it. You're just needing to find the right solution that kind of fits your business around efficiencies. Maybe it's like around responding to calls, like the sales agent. Like there are established tools that can already do that. You can use Zapier for automation. You can use large language models with Zapier, with sales, and bundle it up all kind of in like an automated workflow. So, but inherently it's the easiest to build. So you're talking about 0 to 3 months. You can experiment around it. And then it's not a huge investment. And then so those are typically like the most of the use cases. The second one would be, first we kind of focus on that. I talked about the business model and I talked about the operating model. So we're working on the operating model to condense or consolidate some of those costs. And the next step would be, can I do anything in the revenue, my business model space to create more value for my customers? So, in the way companies are currently doing it is that they're adding chatbots into their websites. So that the whole idea behind these chatbots is about I would link it to the business model because of the way of generating more sales. Maybe these chatbots are trained in the way of providing better product recommendations, maybe add-on sales, right? So helping guide a user towards a purchase decision and things like that. So those capabilities, again, as I kind of talked about, like they are a little bit closer to your business. They're not these like out of the box tools. There's some training that is required and some data behind the scenes that you need to, or some human that needs to like train and customize the system. So you're talking about like the next 3 to 12 months should be focused on looking at opportunities that are actually going to capture more value and deliver more value to your customers as a way of maybe it's these chatbots that are providing these better, recommendations behind the products, services, and things like that. Maybe it's in real estate, it's answering questions via voice and connecting to a live agent when necessary. Again, it just takes a little bit more time to create those solutions, and there's some level of customization that happens. So that's a Horizon 2. And the Horizon 3 would be, I would say, how do you build new capabilities? So it's not just about, again, automating your business. If you're stagnating and you're thinking that your model is going to live forever and 20 years from now it's going to be relevant, you're very much mistaken. So there's part of it is like, how do you use AI to innovate or kind of basically reimagine your business model? So are there new capabilities you could be building on top of your data? Maybe it's the analytics, maybe it's, or doing some insight gathering from the data to be able to understand. It's like, okay, well, a lot of our customers are kind of like asking for this type of thing, or a lot of these requests. What if AI could deliver on those services? And those tend to be a little bit heavier in investment because that's going to be part of like you're putting more of your data to work and then you're building unique capabilities to your business. So think about, again, maybe not a good example, but OpenAI. They're building their own competitive mode. Like they're building a capability that as a result, they can lend or rent to other businesses or other people. And as a result, they're capturing more and more attention. So what capabilities could you be, like AI capabilities, could you be charging your customers as like an additional revenue opportunity that is so valuable to the customers? They'll be like, that's a no-brainer that I should be paying for it, right? That previously I was maybe delivering that in form of human talent. Again, one way of thinking about it, going to back to the McKinsey use case, was that, it's not maybe just about giving access to my internal people, access to this knowledge repository. What if I de-identify those companies and now as like some tier of McKinsey practice, maybe it's like $20,000 a year that they pay these customers pay and they get access to all of our knowledge repository. Like that's a new revenue stream for them, right? So it would require for you to build that capability. It needs to be proprietary and like whatever. But that's a net new capability you build that was previously done and fulfilled by humans before. And what is it in your business that you could potentially scale and ideate? So what new value that you can deliver to your customers? And again, I would say those are the kind of competitive moats. Those are the things that I would say even founders of companies. So like maybe one other example that is more tangible, where I would say if you're a very, very new company, you have this idea. So this model will not apply. I will caveat because again, they're establishing a company, right? They don't have operations, they don't have even a business model that has been proven, right? They're just trying to even build their whole kind of traction and get customers to convert. So they bypass the step 1 and 2, which I was talking about efficiency and revenue, because they don't have either one of them. They're trying to build and establish. So what they're typically focused on is these new capabilities. Sometimes the problem is lack of data. So where I think if you're an established business, and maybe some of your audiences, if you're an established business, you have data that you can put to work, you're going to have a leg up on these startups because they're starting up. They have this innovative idea about AI. Think about OpenAI. Like they had this idea of how to build these transformer models. They didn't have data. What did they do? They went and browsed the internet and then took the content that existed that was publicly available because they didn't have data to innovate from. So, and that's basically, one of the things that people are afraid of right now is like, oh, there's like a flood of these AI startups. I would say, I think you have more of an advantage as an established business to do more with the AI than I would say sometimes the artificial intelligence companies do, because you're sitting on data, you're just not putting it to use. The startups are in constant, I would say, unless they have some partnerships, they're in constant search for data to build their AI algorithms from. So work smarter, not harder. And so like build those AI capabilities on top of data you already have and then beat them to market. So those would be, I would say, the way to think about how to apply AI and where you're going to see the biggest gains in your business in those timeframes. Again, and I'll just kind of revisit it is, in the first 3 months, you're probably looking at the operating model. How can you consolidate the operations? Not consolidate, but how can you condense the costs and control more of the costs with artificial intelligence? So you're looking for efficiency gains. So 0 to 3 months, maybe it's content automation, maybe it's again picking up answering calls. So you're not paying, someone to be not sleeping during the night and then taking those calls. So maybe you delegate that task to AI. Between 3 to 12 months, you're looking at what opportunities do I have to actually capture more value through additional revenue opportunities. So we talked about AI chatbots, product suggestions, maybe carrying a conversation. And then of course, beyond the 12 months or maybe something that you do in parallel is how can you use the existing data or how do you leverage your IP and build artificial intelligence systems on top of in the form of building new AI capabilities for your business that will generate new revenue streams for your business. And again, you have an advantage because you probably most likely are sitting on top of your data, like data that not a lot of other companies have. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, data is super valuable, and those use cases were super valuable too. So I know that we touched upon our why, more clarity on that. We talked about initiatives. We talked about why does AI first not workable, and we want to talk about a little bit much more of the risk, because when we're building something, whether we are following the AI first or not, it's good they're not following the AI first. So in your own perspective, like what are the top 1 or 2 risks that a startup founder or business owner of small medium businesses would usually overlook?
A great question. I think I'll kind of answer your question directly, but I'll kind of maybe caveat with some additional things, companies should consider, not to overwhelm, but to consider. Not everything is going to be applicable, but, if you're operating within US or Europe, you're going to have different considerations for risk because, US does not have any formal regulation around artificial intelligence, but Europe and companies who are complying by, some regulation around AI and data privacy are going to have, some additional considerations. So I would say maybe more of regulatory, AI regulatory kind of risk. So you want to make sure that you have, you follow safety data collection, private, and disclosure practices on the models that are trained. Otherwise, you see all of these big companies getting sued by these regulatory bodies for misappropriating the data or misusing that data in their AI algorithms. And there's also regulations on how AI could be used and what disclosures you should have that. So, for example, like in the European Union, you can't make a decision on someone else's behalf, like on the behalf of a human. So, for example, you can't turn down someone's housing or approval for credit without, giving the user the opportunity to ask for a human review, for example, or for a human to make that decision, or kind of, again, completely ignore like that whole decision. So like there are things that, again, when it deals with some, I would say, human consequence, there are, guidelines and how you can develop these systems and then what you can use AI for. So I would say not underscoring the value of understanding these regulations. In the next MBA program, I think I've taught like for a course of 5 weeks just on regulations. There's just a lot to kind of talk about, to learn about that space. So if you're again operating those areas, it would be really important for companies to understand. And the reason behind that is like it may take just one lawsuit to take a whole entire company down. So all of the time you've invested in building all of this solution, it just requires one lawsuit and some loss of data or misuse of that data to make a company go out of business. So I would say do not underscore that. And I would say the other thing is I would say it's like not often talked about together, but reputation risks due to output. So, how you're actually, depending on where you're deploying your AI solution. So, if you're a B2C or a B2B company, the way you're managing reputational risks is going to be important because, we've learned with a lot of these premature releases, if you're not putting in the appropriate guardrails and anticipating that people will try to take advantage of your systems and they will try to break your systems. How can you get ahead of that? And then so you don't fall flat on your face when you kind of release this model and you're like, well, we never thought that people will be so, not very considerate of our solution. We thought it was so great that people will not be using it in this way. There's always going to be, again, people who will try to exploit the system. So how do you get ahead of that? So, and the reason why I would bundle it with reputation risks, because again, it was just like even I would say like a couple of weeks ago, X released Grok 4 or something like that, and then it just kind of went. I don't know. I don't remember what the exact use cases are, but this is like the second time that they've released an AI model into their communities, and it became like racist, and I would say, gave provided like some very inappropriate comments to people, like automatically responded. And so again, this is not a first time being. So if you're a publicly traded company, if you're a smaller company, very quickly things end up on the news. They basically perpetuate, and things, especially if it's on social media, they go viral. So thing that you didn't anticipate coming ends up as a screenshot on like X platform. Someone else sees it, and then it just kind of blows out of proportion in like a very, very short amount of time. So, and a lot of this can be mitigated upfront if you knew exactly kind of how to design these systems before you actually deploy them. And again, some with output risks, it's about guardrails, it's about data quality, it's about kind of anticipating and almost having someone on your team trying to purposefully break the system. So hire a bad actor on your team to be trying to exploit the system before you ever put out any of these use cases into the market. And I think you'll be in better shape, but there's huge, again, reputational risks related to these AI outputs when things are not accommodated enough. And we're talking about, again, not all AI systems. I'm just talking about large language model or like these generative AI models that are generating some output. And then again, a lot of people are taking advantage of the conversational component and of it. But there's five, I would say, other ones that I would just kind of mention for consideration for folks. So if you are trying to get into kind of like the build realm, so and this is where I think my expertise kind of lies, is actually building these systems. I would say, there's a DVF framework, so desirability, viability, feasibility, that you have to assess. Is this desirable? So when you build it, it's almost like, do I want to invest in this car? That analogy that we talked about, like the delivery. Is it worth even investing in this freaking car? Will it get used? Right. So is there demand for the services, or am I going to spend, $10,000? I don't know how much, on the vehicle, maybe 20,000, but I get one order a week. So is it desirable by my audience? Is there going to be enough demand to drive, to generate enough revenue to cover the costs for that development? You have the viability. Is this sustainable for our business to maintain? How much money is this actually like costing us to run this model, right? So like, is this viable for our business to like maintain? And is it feasible? Do we even freaking have the data, right? So is there data for us to build it? So again, you could jump to conclusions like, yeah, we're going to build and we're going to market, go to the market and announce that, there's this new capability that we're delivering, and oversell and, kind of overpromise these things. And then when push comes to shove and you're trying to get, hands on keyboards, and you're like, whoops, we don't have the data. So please wait. We'll come back to you later with that capability. We're shifting our efforts to something else. So again, feasibility and understanding what infrastructure you have, technology infrastructure kind of you have to support that use case is going to be important. Of course, we talked about strategic fit. So you shouldn't be chasing problems and then being an AI first company for the sake of being AI. Is there a strategic fit of that use case within it? So will it actually pay off? And can that value be measured once it's implemented? And the last one I'll talk about is expertise risk. And again, this is more for companies who are interested in building this. So if you are building an AI solution, there's two types of gaps I'm seeing is, sometimes companies are hiring for talent and they're like, oh, well, it's a development task. Like, we're just going to find some developers and upskill them in artificial intelligence. I would say not a good idea, because there's, difference in what data science, data engineers do and AI/ML engineers do. And then there's also a place for software developers, like front end developers, back end developers. There's like different colors of kind of like the spectrum that cover kind of the needs and of building these AI solutions. So the expertise risk is having the right people on the team to actually execute on that task. Do you have people who are skilled and understand how AI works? And if you don't do that, it's going to be, the timelines will expand. You're paying people salary to run these projects, and then you're like, well, we've been working on this for 6 months and we haven't been able to like put out anything other than the proof of concept. First question, do you have the right people at the table? Do they have expertise in artificial intelligence? And then two, the other question to ask is, do they have the domain expertise? Do they understand your business well enough to design that system effectively for you? So if you're bringing someone, let's say if you're a financial institution, does that person understand finance, like the financial industry? If you're bringing someone into healthcare, do they understand healthcare? Do they understand like that domain? If they're in sales and marketing, maybe something else. Again, do the people who are actually building this solution for you, do they have the domain expertise to help you execute successfully in the most condensed timelines? And one example, and I think this is where, I kind of outshine, a lot of the folks maybe in the industry, and maybe where my competitive moat lies, is building these solutions in the very condensed timelines. Because again, I'm very picky in who is on my teams when we're actually developing these solutions. And as a result, in these highly regulated spaces, we're able to build these solutions in less than a year. Very complex. We're not just talking about chatbots, we're talking about knowledge graphs. We're talking about, machine learning models, proprietary systems, things like that that are built from ground up. We're leveraging rebuilding capabilities. One of my more complex projects currently has 8 AI capabilities that are bundled into one, and some of them are proprietary built. So they can get as complex. And again, some of them have been built in less than a year. And we're getting ready to deploy that again across enterprise. But you have to have the right people at the table who are doing the development or who are doing the strategy, the product strategy, who are doing the execution for you. Otherwise, the timelines just going to continue to expand, and people are just trying to figure things out as they go. So those would be the things to kind of talk about when it relates to risk.
So I would say, Lana, that's pretty awesome. You laid everything on the table, and I would say that I would bet that most of the entrepreneurs wouldn't have been thinking all of those risks. But the one that you just mentioned at the last part was something unconsciously very obvious. And when we tend to do, like, whether it's an AI project or any project, critical thing is there is a learning curve. So if you can mitigate those, lessen the time of that learning curve, will be the best. And if you don't have the right people, whether they understand your business or do they have the expertise or even the capabilities to do your project, it's going to be an uphill battle. I would really love that risk use case that you mentioned earlier because that's very common. So thank you for sharing. Let's go with a much more into the end. I've enjoyed this episode with you and of course, with the audience for sure. I'm going to look at the buy-in versus build because we talked about, you talked about the truck, you talked about the car analogy. And if we're going to talk about a perspective of buying solution, if you're talking about buying, it's more like off the shelf. But if we're going to be building solution from scratch and developing your own, if we're going to talk about the target audience or the mid-market, probably the businesses, what's I would say your recommendation if you want to build either a moat, an efficiency improvement, operational, what's your recommendation?
Yeah. I will add maybe an additional color. I think it's a bit of a complicated one. It also depends on your maturity. So it kind of segues nicely from what I was just talking about expertise and what you were kind of just talking about is like you have to build that expertise, right? So when you're still early in your AI journey, you may not be well suited to start building from the bat, off the bat, right? So your first project should not be building your solutions. You should be kind of maturing your way and understanding for what AI capabilities are. So when we talk about build versus buy, my advice would be, you basically buy first all of these solutions to understand what kind of efficiencies, how these AI systems, their limitations, what they can do well and what they can't. Maybe, and then once you start with the out of the box solutions, you'll kind of be like, oh, well, this doesn't work for us because we need something to be customized to our business. So when I talk about the build versus buy decision, I talk about actually the 3B framework. So it's build, bolt, and then buy. So the buy decision is again take something on that is basically existing off the shelf. You don't have to really customize. Like maybe the extent of customizations is like a custom GPT, maybe some MCP with cloud, and it works on top of your like desktop files. When we're talking about bolt, which is like that hybrid between the build and the buy, is that you're adding some customizations. So are there things that you can customize even either with the existing software? Maybe it's a simple chatbot. Maybe you work with that vented solution and you say, hey, we have a different business. I know you've developed this for content, but can you actually tweak this for real estate? Or there are additional things or additional features you guys don't offer with this. We don't have the infrastructure, nor do we have the people to actually build this. But if we could pay you for this additional feature for you guys to develop, so you're bolting this on. The other idea is like, can you take something off the shelf and actually bring that into your workflow? So you're kind of like screwing an existing, like this capability into an existing workflow. And then when you're actually building these solutions, which would be kind of more further down the spectrum, and again, the spectrum we're talking about is AI maturity. So over time, you're kind of building your expertise and understanding the limitation, you're understanding the capabilities of artificial intelligence. And in a couple of months, maybe it's like 6 months, maybe 12, depending again on the pace at which you're going, you're going to be in a position that you understand and you see the gaps with these vended solutions like the buy solutions. You're like, you know what, I think we are well positioned, we have the data, we have the infrastructure to actually do some proof of concepts around this. So like, and we have some use cases that we want to develop, and in that case you would take on the buy, but would be much more competitive. It may be complex, and the way to, again, it doesn't have to be like, oh yeah, I have to go and hire full timers to actually do this work. Start with contractors, start with consultants to help you build and guide your strategy for how to build these, but make sure what you're building is actually going to move the needle. Again, you don't want to invest in the car if you don't have demand to drive, kind of to satisfy kind of the investment, or basically for the investment to make sense. You want to be generating that money to pay off for the investment that you've already kind of like put in. And again, when you're building, that's a very expensive kind of undertaking when you're building these solutions from scratch. So I would advise that you do them when you've kind of built that muscle organizationally through maturity, but buy as much as you can as far as like these subscriptions. And again, like the cost of these inferences are going down. Some of them are fluctuating because you now have a bit of, what's it called? I guess it's like the builder's curse, maybe is what I term it, is the builders of these solutions, the ChatGPT is like, oh well, we're so efficient, we can afford to give these $20 subscriptions. Well, what's actually happening is that you have these super users, and then you have, and especially with these enterprise or smaller businesses and AI startups, because they're using these APIs, and then you have like these super users that go above and beyond the usage. So they actually are becoming, unprofitable part of the business for these AI startups, is because, they're using so much of this model space of like this unlimited quota of these AI startups, that they're just not making any sense to do these like subscription, like the $20 subscriptions. They're just costing more money to these organizations. And then you have like a mixture, but again, it's like you have this unevenness that is currently happening. If you build something that is very, very good, and then you release it to the customers, be prepared to have people who are going to be your super users that could potentially be detrimental to like that whole entire business model. So that's another struggle that I see with startups right now, is like, we've developed this feature, or we've developed this startup, or I'm like, and or this new offering. For us to be competitive, we have to charge, let's say, $20 a month, but financially it doesn't freaking make sense. And customers are not willing to pay more for that tier, that type of service. So again, I think you just kind of have to think what makes sense from that capability, the financials, and again, like look through the risks that I've talked about, the DVF, the strategic fit. We talked about expertise risks, the brand reputation, and all kinds of things. All of these would be the culprits for AI failures. And so why, specific businesses, again, like you can have like the most awesomest idea in the world, it is just not viable. And then you forgot to look at the viability of and projecting out the costs of maintaining that solution. So what you think is like, for me to be competitive, it's like we should be charging at $20, but it's actually costing me $30 per user to actually supply that value. Does that make sense for you to create that solution? So de-risk early. And this is where I kind of advise companies, is like, you can do this de-risking and evaluation before you even start a project. So you don't have to wait until you kind of release that. So before you put developers or resources to actually implement it, de-risk the project. So go through those risks that I've kind of mentioned, and then just do the exercise and see if that makes financial kind of business sense.
Yeah, there's already good set of lists to de-risk into before even launching it. So let's look ahead and let's talk about maybe how do you see AI reshaping competitive dynamics for mid-market companies over the next 2 to 3 years? Because I think 5 years might be too long, and the development is so fast. So what's your take?
I would say, AI is accelerating. So one of the things then that I think people should be thinking about is, again, how can you stay ahead of that? A lot of it, you're not going to be building. So, what is your unique IP that you could package around some of these AI solutions like large language models? Again, not a lot of companies can afford to build these very expensive large language models. So, but they're very useful in specific use cases. So, but again, on their own, they're not going to be very protective, but they're getting more and more smarter. So, as a result, you're contributing to the business model of OpenAI and Anthropic and all of these like Microsofts and the Googles of the world. But how are you protecting your business? So that's going to be become more and more important. And is going to surface more is as AI starts to automate away tasks that humans were doing in your business. What is left? Like when distilled to the core, what is your business IP? So how do you start to like really make it more robust? And so it's all around like the human qualities. And one of the things that I do believe that is going to become more and more important is this whole idea is, how like you would have these tags that's like in your clothing that's like made in, I don't know, Taiwan or made in India and then made in Turkey and Italy. So there's almost like an unsaid premium to things that come from Italy, right? Especially on like designer clothing. And it's like leather. Oh, you have like leather from Italy. It means like it's very authentic. It's like whatever. I think there's going to be a premium for human made. I think that there's going to be a tag it's associated with work that is associated with it's like made by human, and then there's going to be some value assigned by that. So maybe that is your competitive mode, and the authenticity behind your services is that you are spending more time one to one with your business with your target customers, and while other companies are automating all of their processes away. So I think that there's going to be a premium served with art being created by humans, and then it not being AI generated content that is not AI generated services that you deliver in person, and you have like these remote offices. But as it becomes to AI is just going to get smarter, and we're already seeing that. It's, I think, just if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like within the last month or so, it's won like the highest honor in like mathematics or whatever, like the highest competition in mathematics. Like it was initially in like 2021 projected that it wouldn't be able to do that until like 2030 or something like that. It's 2025 now. So, and some of these even like more kind of aggressive projections are being beaten. So you don't underestimate kind of the acceleration that is currently happening, and these models are being distilled and they're training those distilled models are training other models, and things like that. So it's just becoming more and more. So how do you protect the core business, whether it's the frameworks, whether it's the human value that is being derived? But one of the other things that I think individuals can do also is, what are those human specific capabilities that are hard for artificial intelligence to replace is going to become more and more. So I think that there's going to be an emergence of like, how do you think critically? How do you kind of look through or have wiser conversations with artificial intelligence to elevate our way of thinking? So this critical thinking, almost like bringing these human qualities and then truly become almost like a hybrid with artificial intelligence. Not everyone can do that. Again, you can become a prompt engineer and copy and paste prompts, but actually understanding how to leverage this technology to drive innovation, to drive all of these things, like those types of roles are going to be more and more important. And that does require human, I would say, experiences. So I would call them like street smarts. So being able to like cut through BS. So not every model can actually do that. Be a very critical thinker, know how to, again, innovate with the help of artificial intelligence. And when I talk about innovation, and I think this is like quite a hyped term because it's like, oh, AI is innovative. No, it's not. It is not innovative. It is built on historical data, as we talked about. In order to build these systems, you have to train it on historical data. So what it can even project out and extrapolate is based on historical patterns. So, and one objection I'm already hearing, potentially is be like, well, it's covered all of the protein, like potential protein structures, possible, and like it's now innovating, it's like leading to game changing innovations in like healthcare and pharmaceuticals. And I'll say, no, it's not. I would say it's like it would have taken us just like a couple of hundreds of years to actually get to the same result, but we would have gotten there given enough time, is just basically taking the intellectual property or kind of the discoveries that humans made and it's accelerating them. So the humans developed the IP, AI is helping accelerate and understand kind of given those constraints, given that historical data, given that historical research, can I help complete that picture? And that's what ultimately it's doing. But the weakness of AI is that it can't think beyond the data it's been trained on. And that's where humans come in. So if you think about like maybe a good example that is relatable is like Leonardo da Vinci. So he was like a famous artist who like drew these like famous painting and sculptor and innovator. He came up with a concept of like a helicopter and like a flying plane hundreds of years became or more than 100 of years, like then it became mainstream. He was like drawing, he had like 35,000 notes and drawings on the concept. And that was even before his time. There was no artificial intelligence, and he didn't have, this access to data to be able to brainstorm concepts. So he was leaning into his experiences. And so building on kind of projects that he's worked on, just observations in nature and stuff like that. But he was extrapolating ideas, connecting like very diverse ideas to be able to forward think hundreds of years in his time. That's what AI cannot do. So I can tell you that maybe it's going to be twofold. There's like they were multifold. So elevation of like the human value. AI is going to continue to accelerate at like lightning speed, even like beating some of the more aggressive projections. And then three is like people are going to crave more trainings on how can I be more of a collaborator with AI to fill in the white spaces of what AI cannot do. And I feel like this is where like that human gap is always going to be there because artificial intelligence is never 100%. So I feel like the humans are going to help fill that remaining gap to get it to 100%.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very comprehensive and very on point. That's beautiful. So, what we're going to do is before we wrap up, I've got 5 rapid fire questions for you with just one word answer. Are you up for it?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So, let's go with the one word that describes the future of mid market business with AI.
Exciting.
Exciting. Why? Why?
I think that there's more opportunities. So things that again were quite reserved for technology companies are now being democratized to more and more companies. So things that were previously, I would say, only accessible to large tech companies like the cloud environments, those business models and are improving and they're becoming more accessible to smaller companies. I would say also artificial intelligence, yes, it's getting smarter, but they're also improving kind of the compute. So even the more kind of the smarter and the largest of the largest language models are becoming even more accessible and more approachable. Like you don't have to invest thousands into subscription costs in order to get access to ChatGPT. So you could tap into the same tools that the employees of Microsoft and Google are using as a small business. So I think that's exciting. And now it's like AI is going to help level the playing field from access standpoint to some of these tools and going to create more innovative, I would say, opportunities for these organizations to take advantage of.
Awesome. Awesome. One word founders must embrace to scale successfully.
Spontaneity. So I would say understanding or maybe experimentation is maybe a better word, is where I was kind of heading because AI is never going to be 100%. And problem sometimes with artificial intelligence is depending on the use case, the types of, I would say, tactics or architectural decisions that you're making around solutions, especially when you're building, they're not going to be one for one between use cases. So you may have some repeatability between, the capabilities you're building, but there are going to be nuances. Maybe it's like the system prompts or things like that. Maybe it's like the evaluation process of like your output, how you're actually judging the output, and then what quality metrics you're assigning to it, how you're measuring success. Those things are going to be quite experimental in nature, and it's going to be hard to predict in a waterfall fashion, like from the beginning of the project. This is exactly how it's going to go. The next 3 months are going to go like smooth as butter. It never is that way. So I feel like in order for founders, mid-market companies to embrace artificial intelligence is to have like more of this like experimental mindset, and then being able to like being willing to fail. So there are, things that are not going to go right or as planned, and things that you're going to continue to learn. And, I'm even recently, I had an instance where, one of the team members had indicated that, like, oh, if we would have done this like 3 months ago, this would have been better. Well, we wouldn't have known that if we didn't do this thing. So sometimes it's like you find out as a result of experimentation, as a result of like building these things that are really hard to anticipate with artificial intelligence. And then in, kind of being open to failures or being open to adjusting is going to be the way of really succeeding with artificial intelligence, because it's really hard to predict exactly how the game is going to play 3 months from now and what techniques. And then again, to have like this nicely laid out project plan from the beginning, that you're just going to complete that project in 3 months, walk away, get a trophy, and then and everything is great. If that is the type of project you're doing, I suspect you're copying someone like a competitor's product, which you're not building a competitive moat probably. If you're, again, developing a design pattern that already exists in the market, then my first question is, why the heck are you building it? Why aren't you licensing it in the first place? So don't build something that has already been built. And if you are going to kind of go down that rabbit hole, go to the dark side of building, be very experimental.
That's a very eye opener for a lot of founders. Great experiment. So let's go with the next one word that describes how you feel about AI today.
I would say like the first thing that came to mind, just intuitively, like frustrated, because being on the side of actually like making AI work and then seeing a lot of companies struggle is like quite frustrating. I'm like, why? It's not that difficult. But there's also like, a term called the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge is like, it's hard for you to understand what it's like to not know what you already know. So, and I feel like to me, it's kind of like intuitive, and I can talk about like these frameworks and experiences, but how do I help organization really bridge that gap? So, because again, to me, it's like very intuitive, but I also understand like I have to remind myself to like put myself in their shoes when they're just at the start of their journeys, and they may not have all of the knowledge. They haven't gone through these cycles. So it's having that patience of doing the discovery, getting some of these like, again, low risk investments of like these buying of subscriptions products, understanding how it works. Like, don't go into the high risky kind of building space. Test, test the waters, like see what works, what doesn't, and things like that. But I feel like the frustrating part is also sometimes it's like we tend to overthink, because most companies, and they try to preserve kind of like their revenues and preserve the business that they're currently operating. So they tend to be risk averse to try anything new, which kind of goes into the spiral. It's like, well, we don't know, but we're not willing to try because it's risky and we haven't done it. And then there's all of these excuses. And so there's like analysis paralysis and things never move. So, and I feel like a lot of companies are in that space right now, is like they want to, but they're kind of hesitating. So it's a bit frustrating to kind of to put some of these frameworks and like some of these things to use. If, companies should kind of, again, take low risk decision. I feel like that's basically maybe making the first step, is understanding limitations, understanding and really dedicating to learning from it, and then trying to really progressively get to that next level of maturity, and then doing that purposefully. Track that outcome, and then track that maturity across the organization.
Yeah, true. The first stage is frustration when you start learning the tools. So let's go with the next one word every founder should eliminate from their mindset.
AI first. I think we talked about it as like, let's
Yeah.
let's find the problem for AI to solve. Not a good way of kind of thinking about AI. And then again, it's like we're an AI first company is like a badge of honor. Again, to folks who don't understand, or maybe who haven't built it, it sounds shiny and it looks cool. But again, for people who have implemented it, like myself, I feel like it doesn't set the right tone, because I'm looking at you and being like, oh, you have access to all of these AI tools. You're on the hunt to where to plug them into your business without kind of the top down strategic thinking around it. So your core value is not AI. AI is just a technology, it's just a tool to deliver a business. AI is not the definition of your business, it's a means of, again, getting somewhere to delivering value to your customers. It is not like the defining factor of a business.
Yeah, so profound. So last but not the least, one word that defines a truly future-proof business.
Moat. And I would say it's like moat can come in terms of data, IP. What's the secret sauce of your business that makes you unique and can be, again, an individual who establishes a business with artificial intelligence? Like they can totally automate the heck out of their business. But again, like it sits on top of this value, right? So like you talk about maybe like a good analogy there to talk about is an iceberg. So you have an iceberg and the tip of the iceberg is like floats on top of the water. And that's the person, that's the business who's known for. But you shouldn't disregard all of the value that sits below it. And that's in the form of IP that is built on experiences, the secret sauce, the value of delivering that value to customer manually. There's a reason for why you're kind of building that business in the first place. There's like a solid foundation beneath the water that actually like, is hidden underneath all of these layers. And so what are you automating? So you still are going to be kind of the person or the company of record, but what is that unique value that you're delivering? And then how is that value helping you differentiate from yourself? And an example, like a tangible example that's more relatable, is Netflix and Blockbuster, which is like a very commonly talked about example, has like been beaten to death. But AI can be one of the core drivers of the business model, which is like the recommendation system behind Netflix. Blockbuster, which was their competitor at the time, it was almost like that David and Goliath type of story where Blockbuster was like the big giant, and the Netflix was the smaller, but they gained momentum because their IP was in their recommendation system. And so by the time that Blockbuster realized that, hey, they're building something that's very innovative, let's shift to that, Netflix was already operating at a higher level scale than they were because, again, they've built this IP around their recommendation system and how they're delivering content to their end users, that it was like really hard to catch up with. And the amount of money and time it would require for Blockbuster to arrive, they ended up calling basically becoming bankrupt as a result, and they would never kind of catch up to them. But it's like you kind of have to understand like what is that business IP that you're trying to scale. Maybe sometimes, and I've advised founders and that come from research institutions, so they've spent their PhDs focusing on like answering a specific gap in the market that hasn't been filled, and now they're building a solution that helps scale that. So their IP is like the research that they've spent all of these years doing, and now they're looking to automate bits and pieces and like really scale out that and benefit like the public with that. Same thing again with like drugs, like pharmaceuticals industries and things like that. There's like IP behind how they're developing those drugs and maybe accelerating the different tasks. But again, what is the foundation you're building your business on? So what is your competitive moat that you could that AI can help accelerate?
Beautiful. So, Lana, thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for wisdom passing on to our audience. And if you're a founder listening and you've been stuck in the mess of your own growth, this episode just gave you a window into how to scale faster, smarter with AI. Svetlana, thank you for bringing both the bigger picture thinking and the practical filters of our audiences needed to be heard. And your valuable use cases are very, very much valid. So if you found this valuable, subscribe, share with someone who needs it, and watch my next episode. Let us know what you think about this episode so that we can improve and give you much more value on the next episode. Until then, I'll see you on my next